What is up, guys? Today I made a diorama. I began by opening the box of the kit and taking out the parts. Now this particular kit has two versions of it, the desert one and the eastern front paint scheme. I ended up choosing the eastern front. I then began to assemble the kit. After assembling the lower hull, I assembled the upper section of it and glued the side skirts on. Now, just a footnote, I really shouldn't have glued the side skirts on yet, as it made it very difficult to put on the treads, the tracks later on, but it's just something to keep in mind. I then completed the turret and stuck that on as well. After the kit was finished, I went ahead and started the painting process. I began by covering the whole thing in a Mr. Surfacer black primer. This really helps to unify the surface and take away any residue or glue that the paint wouldn't adhere to properly. After that was done, I took some light gray, mixed a little white in, and applied it to the model. Now, this was originally supposed to be my German gray, but I accidentally mixed the paint color way too light. I decided to put it on anyways, but I ended up going over it later on with a darker paint color that added some black to. Just because this color was just so light. Yeah, here I am just adding a darker color that's more accurate to the German gray they would have used in real life. I left the original color, the German gray color, inside the airbrush compartment, and I added a little bit of white to it, so it was closer to the original color that I had started spraying the first time. And I went ahead and sprayed this over the lighter areas where there were raised surfaces to add a lot of detail. After that was dry, I put a flat matte coat over the entire model and used some Tamiya panel line filler to really add some detail to all those small cracks and crevices. Once that was done, I was really happy with the result, and I coated the thing in a gloss top coat. I then went ahead, glued on the tracks, and I had already pre-painted them with a brown color. I wanted to try hairspray chipping, so I didn't actually have some hairspray on hand. What I had was volume spray. I still don't know what that is, but I thought it would work the same as hairspray, so I ended up just spraying that over the diorama, praying that it would work. It ended up working pretty okay, actually, as you'll see in a minute, although I think hairspray still would have worked better. Yeah, so here it was. It really made the paint very glossy, honestly. I kind of want to try using this as a top coat, but it worked. Ended up working pretty well, and I was pretty happy with how it was turning out. Now, to make the winter camo, I went ahead and sprayed some flat white paint. I made sure to use water-based flat white paint so that when I do the hairspray chipping process, it would be a lot easier. I'm not sure if this is really something you're supposed to do, or if it really matters if you use oil-based paint, but I ended up using just acrylic paint. Just something to keep in mind. And I just sprayed this in little patterns all over the tank. After that was dry, I went ahead and I started to use the hairspray chipping method. Now, what I'm going to do, right, I took an old paintbrush, it's all beat up, this paintbrush is so old, and I dipped it in some hot warm water. Now I'm just gently rubbing it across the surface of the model. In some areas I accidentally went through the original paint and onto the plastic. I'll show you spots like that in a second. But the goal is to just chip off the paint in a way that it would make it look natural. Now you can do this with all kinds of methods and colors, it really doesn't matter. I've even seen people do this technique to get realistic rust chips, which is really cool. I kind of want to try that in the future. But what I just did with it was to make it where the winter camo would have worn away after they had painted it. And I just did this in all the raised areas, and honestly you don't really have to try too hard because it'll come off naturally anyway. I definitely recommend you guys try this, and I was really happy with how it was turning out. Now you'll see there are a few yellow areas on the tank where I'd accidentally went through the paint onto the plastic, and that's something you guys gotta keep in mind. In the end it wasn't noticeable, so I wasn't too worried, but just be careful when you're doing that. As it was my first time, I was pretty happy. And then went ahead and I started to work on the diorama. Now what I'll be using are these figures that I had painted previously from a different diorama that I didn't end up posting, sadly, but I ended up using the two that I had already. They're already pre-painted, so I'm not going to go into that. But for the base I'll be using some XPS insulation foam. To begin planning out the diorama, I had the tank on and the two figures, and I just went ahead and marked it with a permanent marker. After I'd shaped the diorama, I went ahead and I took some, I forget what that was called. I took some putty and I mixed it by my hand. Now, my original plan was to cover the entire diorama in clay, but as I didn't have any clay, I decided to use the Sculpey putty instead. I only added this in the areas where I wanted to have track marks, so what you'll see me doing in a second is just indenting the tracks from the tank, the leftover ones, into the clay, or the putty, to make it look like it's on a dirty road, or a road in general. And this is definitely not the way I would recommend doing it. It didn't work out that well at all. I'm glad I was covering it in snow in the end. Definitely go ahead and get some clay. Air drying clay probably works best, and apply that over the model instead, or the base. Night Shift has some great videos on that. Now this is something I haven't tried in a while, so I took some joint compound, right, the stuff you use to patch holes in your wall, and I would just goop this up over the side of the diorama. Now my plan is, right, to have the tank going through the village that had gotten blown up or some sort of building. And I had some leftover bricks from a previous diorama. I'll link that in the description of the video that I had made. If you want to see how I made those, check the link in the description. And I added these to simulate rubble and bricks and stuff that had fallen from the building during the war. And I just scattered those on the side of the road. After that was done, I went ahead and I started to use some texture paste. Now the texture paste I'm using is from Ammo. Works great. I honestly don't remember what it was called since I threw away the bottle since it was empty. But I would just stipple this over the diorama, adding some texture. It also kind of helped to paint the diorama as well. I probably wouldn't recommend doing this, as it didn't really add anything, it didn't really help anything out. So definitely keep this for smaller things, but I just decided to try it out anyways. I then took some earth from my backyard and sprinkled that on the diorama. I glued this down later with some PVA glue mixed with water and a few drops of soap to break down the surface tension. I went ahead and I sprayed some brown paint over the surface of the diorama. Now you'll notice there is dirt flying off because I hadn't waited until the glue was fully dry before spraying it because I was bored that day. Definitely don't do that. as you'll see, dirt's just flying everywhere at me, a mess to clean up, so definitely don't do that. After that was done, I went ahead and I made a red brick color using some paint I had left over, and I just individually painted all the bricks. And here was the finished base before I started to add the weathering and stuff. I was pretty happy with it, and I went ahead and I dry brushed some gray I had left over onto the base. Now I have a whole text that's going to tell you this in a second, but unfortunately my SD card corrupted. The whole thing just snapped in half. I don't know how that happened. But I lost all the data that I had on it of me adding the snow textures and all the winter. So I'm very sorry about that, guys. Here's a whole slide I made telling you guys what happened, but I lost all the footage of me adding the snow and the ice and finishing up the diorama, so I ended up just painting the sides of the diorama black and calling it good, and here's the finished result. Guys, I really do hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please be sure to hit that like button. This was a very interesting diorama. I hadn't done a snow scene in a little while, so I just wanted to try that. Not my best diorama, but you know, I'm pretty happy with it. Anyways, next video will be of a race car, so that's kind of cool. Stay tuned for that. Well, happy modeling, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you. Bye.